Once upon a gardening time, I harvested ginger that I planted in sacks and containers some months ago. But where did this ginger actually come from? How was it grown? What condition was it grown in? And do you know that these gingers are 100% organic? That's wow. So let's get to how I grew this ginger. Much ginger I can get from multiplying this, so stick around. So last year, one of my store-bought ginger was actually sprouting, and I took it upon myself to place it in soil, and after some days it generated these eyes. Now these sprouts were so very encouraging that I had to grow this ginger right in container. So I was going to initiate the growth of this ginger in this container so that it will be able to grow effectively before I transplant it into a larger space where it's going to grow effectively. After placing that in soil, I also covered it with some more soil and then watered it to give it a reason to start growing effectively. So immediately after doing this, the growth of this ginger had been initiated, and after just 2 days of placing it in soil, it started to grow and form new sprouts, and you can see that the sprouts began to come out greenish this time, and photosynthesis had to take place as usual. So I planted just one ginger, and you can see that I already have 4 sprouts on this ginger, which is to tell you that the ginger that I used was going to produce so many ginger in return. So I placed this in soil, and you can see that the growth rate was increasing daily, and that was also making me happy at that time when I was growing this ginger in this container. So the ginger began to grow so big that it was giving me a signal that it was time to repot this ginger in a larger sack or a larger container. And so that's why I'll say, if you want to grow ginger, it's better you plant your ginger directly into a larger container or a larger vessel or a larger space where the ginger will not require any form of transplanting, to ease the growth of the ginger and reduce shock on the roots. Anyways, my ginger grew so well, and you can see that the leaves were absolutely green, which was an indication that it was having the best condition and best of nutrient there it was growing. But I had to transplant this because it was becoming so big that the plant needed a larger area for optimum ginger stem production. So in transplanting the ginger, I had to use the ball of the earth method so that to reduce any form of root shock from the plant. So I had to remove it carefully to be able to transplant it as it was in the container without any disturbance to the roots. And you can see that it was on a rainy day that I did this, so that it will avoid any form of shock on the roots. I also want you to note that these gingers are organic gingers, that is, I have not added any form of artificial fertilizer. It was all just by the use of composted soil. I made a video on how to make compost at home from your kitchen scraps, and the link is on the description of this video. So I took this ginger and I wanted to transplant it into the sack where it's going to be growing till maturity. Since this was the best practice that I did during the time I was growing this ginger, because it really gave the ginger more space and much soil that will provide essential nutrient that was necessary for the growth of the ginger stems. After placing it in the soil, I had to cover it so that the stems could not be visible in the outer soil, and to prevent every form of erosion, and also to give it just that feeling that it was actually growing there from the start. I also didn't forget to also water this effectively, because watering was a way that is going to reduce the shock and heat on the root, because this was done in the daytime but on a very rainy day, and it just worked so perfectly. I also grew another ginger so that by the time I was going to harvest this other ginger, this other one was going to serve as an option to wait for another cycle of ginger. So after transplanting the ginger in sacks, you can see that they began to grow so big, and this was very encouraging for me as a second time I was growing ginger. So I took a waste product from my chicken, and this was composted chicken manure, and I was going to add this because these are organic ginger, and the only thing that should be used for their manuring or fertilization should be organic products. So I used this organic chicken manure and I put it there, and I also added composted wastes from the kitchen scraps from time to time, and you can see that the ginger had begun to form. And I also put some turmeric close to it. So turmeric as well as ginger is very necessary for you to have them at home, and that's why I also planted the turmeric. But there was a kind of violent breeze that made these turmeric leaves to fall, and It was so very discouraging at this point, but I had to trim the leaves because it was going to grow back definitely. So I also trimmed some of the leaves of my ginger because this ginger, I would want them to focus on the root production other than just the production of leaves. And so that was why I was going to trim the leaves of this ginger definitely to allow them to grow more roots down there. So I also went forward to plant more ginger because I want more ginger to be growing by the time I've also harvested the initial one that I planted. I broke ginger into pieces that I will use to plant for each individual plant in different areas in the garden. I also ensured that each piece that I broke had an eye. An eye is a sprouting part of the ginger that you are going to use it. It's also called a bud or a sprouting bud. And I ensured that each piece that was broken had a sprouting bud that I was going to use for growing, so that it's grown easily and there will be no decay of the rhizome in the soil. So planting is best done in the morning or late in the evening. So I took these things late in the evening and went ahead to plant this ginger in a raised bed. And I first of all I tilled the soil by plowing it to give it that effect of a mechanical plow, and then I also wanted to make the soil just to soften it a bit so that the ginger would have a lot of space to spread its roots in the raised bed. So I placed this ginger in the soil, and you have to see that when I'm planting the ginger this time, I had to plant them with the eyes, that's the sprouting bud, facing up, so that it's going to sprout in about 2 days rather than waiting for a very long time for it to sprout. So I did it such a way that the sprouting eye will face the topsoil and grow so very faster than usual. But due to the size of this raised bed, is a very small raised bed, and so that's why I was only going to plant 3 ginger in this raised bed and reserve the others for direct planting in seeds. So after planting that, I also watered it to enable the thing also grow so well, because you can also soak ginger in water and to end up growing so well. So you can see that the ginger, I also removed some of the leaves that were used to make tea. Yes, ginger leaves can be used for medicinal tea and other herbal purposes that you would love to know if you also Google about it. And in turn, this can also help by making the ginger to focus on root formation, stem formation, other than the formation of these leaves. So you removing the leaves is just like giving the ginger more avenue to grow in the roots and in the stems. So this process is actually optional, and these things will still end up growing if at all you did it. I also did it to my turmeric after the violent wind came and brushed down the whole leaves, and funny enough, it started growing as usual, and it also enabled the ginger and the turmeric to both spread their roots and stems horizontally as it was growing in the soil. It was getting to 5 months after growing the ginger, and ginger was very impressive at that point. It has grown so well, and the other ginger that I planted was also having a competition for it for space. And then it got to 7 months when I was definitely going to harvest it, because it was actually a time that the ginger had grown so well, and you can see that all those leaves that I cut was actually regenerated, and this ginger was absolutely ready for harvesting. So this was a rainy day when I was going to harvest this ginger and review what had been growing underneath the soil. So this is the point that most gardeners may find it so very interesting to harvest what they have grown. So for this ginger stayed for exactly 7 months, because I planted it by November and this is July. Like this is the earlier part of July. So this ginger is exactly 7 months today. So that's why I'm going to be harvesting it right now, and I've documented everything on how I grew this ginger, and it's so very interesting. And yeah. So let's get to the harvesting of this ginger right now that I planted in sacks. I think this is like the second time I'm growing ginger. This is the second time I'm growing ginger successfully, and it's very, very nice, and it's time to harvest it. So this is the ginger that I planted after 7 months of growing this ginger in sacks. It actually started from container and its life was concluded in sacks, and now is the time that we're going to find out if actually my growing of ginger in sacks was actually worth it or not. Whether the result turned out well or not, growing ginger has actually been fun. So to harvest my ginger, I went ahead to pull the ginger out of the sack, And I just did it once by folding it in my arms and then removing it and then shaking it off from the soil. So this was the result that I got from planting just a small stem of ginger, and after 7 months I got this. So if you are still watching up till now, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow. As for the ginger, I'm just going to clean the ginger, wash it and get it ready for domestic use, or also replanting the ginger in the future. So that's how I grew ginger in sack. So I'll see you guys in my next video.